He walked into the wedding venue like a man arriving at the proof of his own victory. Ryan Whitmore stepped out of a white Bentley beneath the pale September sun, one hand adjusting the cuff of his tuxedo, the other resting lightly at the back of Vanessa Blake, the woman he had once called a mistake in private and now displayed like a trophy in public. The Ashford glass house rose ahead of them at the edge of the Hudson Valley, all steel, glass, white roses, and late afternoon gold, the kind of place people booked a year in advance just to make their guests whisper before the ceremony even began. A string quartet played somewhere beyond the open doors. Champagne moved on silver trays. Cameras flashed against the polished stone walkway as if Ryan had built the sunlight himself. He smiled for every lens. He made sure to pause beneath the arch of white orchids, made sure Vanessa's ring caught the light, made sure the old business partners, cousins, former college friends, and people who only came to measure success could see exactly how far he believed he had climbed. Someone near the valet stand murmured that Emily Carter must have heard about it by now. Ryan's smile sharpened, not enough for the cameras to catch, but enough for the man beside him to notice. "I hope she has," he said, smoothing the front of his jacket. "Some people need to see what they missed." Vanessa laughed softly and leaned closer to him, her veil brushing his shoulder like a curtain closing on an old life. Ryan looked at the building again, at the glass walls glowing like crystal, at the terrace stretching toward the river, at the rows of imported flowers arranged with quiet, expensive perfection. He had chosen this venue because it was impossible to ignore. He had chosen it because every photograph would say wealth, arrival, power. And somewhere beneath all of that, he had chosen it because he wanted the woman he betrayed to feel small when she saw the pictures. Emily had once stood beside him in rented apartments with leaky windows and grocery store flowers, believing in versions of him that no one else had been patient enough to see. She had pressed his shirts before investor meetings, reviewed contracts after midnight, skipped vacations, sold her grandmother's bracelet when his company needed one more month of payroll. But those were details Ryan no longer kept polished in his memory. In the story he told now, he had risen alone, and Emily had simply failed to keep up. Guests parted as he entered the lobby, their voices lowering beneath the high glass ceiling. The air smelled of gardenias, polished wood, and cold champagne. On the far wall, behind a marble reception desk, the venue's gold emblem shimmered under soft light, the Ashford Glass House. Ryan barely looked at it. To him, it was only a name printed on invitations, stitched into napkins, glowing behind the bar where his future would be toasted. He did not see the staff exchange a careful glance when he gave his name. He did not notice the young coordinator's fingers pause for half a second over the guest list. He did not see the general manager step quietly into the side office, close the door, and make a call that lasted less than a minute. Ryan only saw the room bending around him, the white aisle waiting, the glass chapel prepared, the guests smiling as though the world had agreed with his version of the past. When an old friend clapped him on the shoulder and said, "You really went all out," Ryan glanced toward the sweeping staircase and replied, "I wanted the best." Vanessa deserved something Emily never could have imagined. The words landed lightly in the room, dressed as a joke, but a few smiles stiffened. Outside, the river moved beyond the glass in a slow silver line. Inside, every candle had been lit, every chair aligned, every petal placed exactly where it belonged. Ryan believed he had walked into a place designed to celebrate his new beginning. He had no idea that every inch of it, from the marble beneath his shoes to the lights above his head, belonged to the woman he thought he had left behind. No one had written Emily Carter's name on the wedding guest list. Ryan had made sure of that. There was no place card for her near the front, no chair saved out of politeness, no quiet invitation sent through mutual friends with a cruel little hope that she might come and watch him begin again. In Ryan's mind, Emily belonged somewhere far from the glass chapel and the white roses, somewhere smaller, quieter, still carrying the shape of the life he had left behind. But her name was everywhere he did not know how to look. It was on the property deed filed with Dutchess County. It was on the operating license framed in the private office behind the reception desk. It was printed at the bottom of the florist contracts, the catering approvals, the lighting invoices, and the insurance certificates stacked neatly in a locked cabinet. It was saved in the staff directory as owner, though most guests only knew the venue by its polished name and flawless service. To them, the Ashford Glasshouse felt like old money, like something inherited from a family with portraits in hallways and lawyers on retainer. To Emily, it had once been a freezing, abandoned greenhouse with cracked panes, rusted beams, and weeds growing through the concrete floor. 5 years earlier, after the divorce papers were signed, she had stood inside that ruin wearing a wool coat from a discount rack and shoes too thin for the mud. Her checking account had held less than $2,000. Her apartment in Poughkeepsie still smelled of cardboard boxes and the lemon cleaner she used to scrub away the emptiness. Ryan had taken the townhouse, the friends who preferred his table, and the story that made him look like the man who had outgrown a wife who could not keep pace. Emily had taken silence, a used laptop, and the kind of exhaustion that settled behind the eyes but never reached the spine. He had told her, on the last morning, while sunlight cut across the kitchen counter they had chosen together, "You were never built for my world." She had not answered. She had only looked at the coffee cup in his hand, the one she had bought him after his first investor meeting, and realized how quietly a person could become a stranger. For months afterward, people asked if she was angry. Emily never knew how to explain that anger felt too loud for what had happened. What she felt was colder than that. It was the sharp, clean knowledge that she had spent years helping a man climb a staircase, only to have him turn at the top and pretend she had been standing in the way. So she stopped explaining. She took consulting jobs. She planned small corporate events in hotel ballrooms with stained carpets and bad lighting. She learned vendor pricing, permit deadlines, fire codes, liquor liability rules, and the quiet language of wealthy clients who never raised their voices but expected impossible things by Friday. At night, she drove past the abandoned greenhouse on Route 9 and saw not decay, but reflection. Glass could break, yes, but glass could also hold light. By the time Ryan stepped into the Ashford Glasshouse beside Vanessa, Emily Carter was not missing from the room because she had been excluded. She was absent because the room was already hers. The first person on staff to recognize the name was Lily Morgan, a 24-year-old event coordinator who had been with the Ashford Glasshouse for only 7 months and still kept color-coded sticky notes along the edge of her desk. She was checking the final seating chart when the groom's full name appeared again across the top of the file, Ryan Alexander Whitmore. For most people, it was just a name printed in elegant serif font beneath Vanessa Blake's. For Lily, it was a name she had heard once in a very quiet room, spoken not with bitterness, but with the careful distance people use when touching something that used to burn. She looked from the contract to the framed ownership certificate on the wall outside the private office. Emily Carter's signature curved across the bottom in black ink, steady and unmistakable. Lily did not gasp. The Glasshouse staff had been trained never to bring panic into a room where guests were paying to feel untouchable. Instead, she stood, smoothed the front of her black dress, and walked down the service hallway where the sound of the string quartet softened into a distant hum. In the main lobby, Ryan was laughing with 2 men in navy suits, one hand raised as he described the honeymoon suite in Napa and the private tasting he had arranged for the following week. Vanessa stood beside him, glowing beneath a veil so fine it almost disappeared against the light. Everything about them looked expensive, chosen, rehearsed. Everything about the staff moved quietly around them, carrying trays, adjusting flowers, opening doors, protecting a secret that did not belong to them. In the back office, General Manager Martin Ellis was reviewing the timing sheet when Lily stepped in and placed the file on his desk without a word. His eyes fell to the groom's name. For 1 second, his face changed, not dramatically, not enough for anyone outside the office to notice, but enough. He reached for his phone, then paused. Through the glass wall, he could see the chapel prepared in soft white and champagne gold, 200 chairs aligned in perfect rows. The aisle runner unrolled from the entrance to the floral arch. Canceling was not an option. Panic was not an option. This was Emily Carter's house, and Emily did not build anything on panic. Martin dialed her number. 3 rings. Then her voice, calm and low, answered from wherever she was. Martin. He did not waste words. Emily, the Whitmore wedding has arrived. The line went still. Not empty. Not shocked. Just still, as if even the air on her side of the call had stepped back to listen. Martin looked down at the file, at the groom's signature on the bottom of the venue agreement, at the clause marked owner access for investor and operational review. Ryan Whitmore, he added gently. with Vanessa Blake. On the other end, Emily did not ask if he was sure. She did not ask how it happened. She did not ask whether the guests had seen her name, or whether Ryan knew, or whether the wedding could be moved, delayed, or quietly made uncomfortable. Her silence held none of the things Martin had feared. No trembling. No old wound reopening for an audience. When she finally spoke, her question was so ordinary that Lily lifted her eyes from the floor. Has the bride approved the final floral arch? Martin blinked once, then checked the timing sheet. Yes. White orchids, garden roses, and eucalyptus. Approved this morning. And the West Terrace heaters? Ready. It may drop to 58 degrees after sunset. Good, Emily said. Make sure the older guests are seated away from the draft near the north glass. Mrs. Whitmore's grandmother requested easy access to the aisle. Martin's hand tightened around the phone, not from fear now, but from recognition. This was why the glass house survived storms, late vendors, broken generators, impossible clients, and winter cancellations. Emily did not let emotion make decisions that belonged to structure. Do you want us to change anything? He asked. Another quiet breath moved through the line. No. Let them have the perfect wedding. Then the call ended. Martin slowly lowered the phone. Lily stood by the desk, the file still open between them. Outside, Ryan's laughter rose through the lobby, bright and careless, while a server carried champagne past the gold emblem on the wall. The ceremony would begin on time. The candles would be lit. The music would swell. The guests would see exactly what they came to see. And somewhere beyond the glass and the river light, Emily Carter had allowed the stage to remain untouched because the most powerful revelations do not need to be forced. They only need the right room, the right moment, and a man confident enough to walk into both without reading the name on the door. By the time the first guests began drifting toward the glass chapel, Emily Carter was 30 miles away in a small office above a closed bakery in Beacon, standing beside a window that looked down on Main Street. Below her, a man carried paper bags of takeout through the evening traffic. A woman in running shoes crossed at the light, and the old brick buildings caught the last amber edge of sunset. It was not the kind of view Ryan would have respected. There were no marble columns, no private valet, no crowd waiting to applaud. But it was the room where Emily had rebuilt her life one invoice, one permit, and one quiet morning at a time. On the desk behind her sat the original photograph of the greenhouse from the day she bought it. The roof had sagged then. Several glass panels were missing. The floor was stained from years of rainwater and neglect. A faded for sale sign leaned against the entrance, half hidden by weeds taller than her knees. Ryan had seen that picture once, months after the divorce, when a mutual acquaintance mentioned that Emily had bought an old property near the river. He had laughed and said it sounded like exactly the kind of sentimental mistake she would make. Emily had heard about the comment later. She had not corrected it. At the time, the greenhouse had no heat, no working restroom, and no guaranteed path to approval from the town board. What it did have was light. Even in winter, even through cracked panes and dust, the morning sun entered in long white bands and laid itself across the concrete like a promise that did not need witnesses. Emily spent that first December wearing 2 sweaters under her coat, measuring the floor with a rented laser tool while her breath turned pale in the air. She learned the difference between restoration and replacement, between what could be saved and what had to be removed. She sat through zoning meetings where men with tired eyes asked if she understood how expensive historic glass could be. She nodded, because understanding did not make a dream impossible. It only made the work honest. During the day, she planned retirement dinners, charity luncheons, and hotel conferences for clients who rarely remembered her name after the final invoice was paid. At night, she drove to the greenhouse with coffee from a gas station, changed into rubber boots, and swept leaves from corners no one had touched in years. There were evenings when the rain found every weakness in the roof, dripping into buckets lined across the floor like a strange little orchestra. There were mornings when her car would not start in 10-degree weather, and she sat behind the wheel with her gloved hands on the steering wheel, laughing once because crying would have taken too much energy. Still, she returned. She returned when contractors underestimated her. She returned when banks asked for more collateral. She returned when former friends sent wedding photos, vacation photos, housewarming photos, small polished reminders that Ryan's world had continued without making room for her. Slowly, the greenhouse changed. Rust gave way to brushed steel. Broken panes became insulated glass. Mud became polished stone. The old drainage trench became a reflecting pool running beside the main walkway. She chose every fixture herself, not because she had to control everything, but because she knew what it felt like to be told she did not belong inside beauty. So she built a place where beauty had rules, structure, warmth, and dignity. She built a place where nervous brides could breathe before walking down the aisle, where grandparents could sit close enough to see, where every candle was checked before a room was opened. The Ashford Glass House was not born from revenge. Revenge would have burned out too quickly. It was born from repetition, from mornings when no one clapped, from contracts signed with hands still smelling faintly of bleach and coffee, from the decision to become steady before becoming admired. And now, as Martin's call still echoed in the quiet office, Emily looked at the photograph of the ruined greenhouse and then at the live security feed on her laptop, where Ryan Whitmore stood beneath the completed ceiling, smiling as if he had arrived above everyone else. She touched the edge of the screen once, not to remember him, but to measure the distance between the woman he left and the woman who owned the light around him. Nathaniel Brooks entered Emily Carter's life on a Thursday evening in late spring, not with roses, not with promises, and not with the easy arrogance of a man used to being welcomed before he spoke. He arrived as a client no one had expected to impress. His family office had booked the Ashford Glass House for a private foundation dinner, 120 guests, 7 courses, 3 nonprofit directors, and a guest list that included people whose names appeared on museum wings and hospital buildings across Manhattan. By then, the venue had been open for 18 months, successful enough to be whispered about, but still young enough that Emily checked every detail herself. She had been in the service corridor when the power flickered. Once, then twice. Then the west wing went dark. In the chapel, the candles still glowed, but the kitchen monitors cut out, the terrace lights died, and a nervous silence moved through the staff like cold water. Emily did not raise her voice. She set down the clipboard, removed her heels, and walked through the back hallway in stocking feet so she would not make a sound on the stone. Within 3 minutes, she had the backup generator online. Within 5, she had the jazz trio shifted closer to the dining room to cover the pause. Within 8, she had servers carrying champagne through the dim terrace, as if the softer lighting had been planned from the beginning. The guests never knew there had been a problem. They only remembered that, for a few beautiful minutes, the glass house seemed to glow entirely by candlelight, the Hudson beyond the windows turning violet as the sun disappeared. Nathaniel noticed. He had been standing near the reflecting pool, tall, still, dressed in a charcoal suit that did not ask to be admired. He watched Emily kneel beside a floor panel after the guests had moved on, one hand holding a flashlight, the other tightening a cable clamp with the calm precision of someone who had long ago stopped waiting for rescue. Most wealthy men Emily had served looked through problems until someone else solved them. Nathaniel looked at the person solving it. Later that night, after the last black car left the Circle Drive and the catering crew loaded the final crates, Emily found him in the main hall, studying the restored beams above the glass ceiling. "You handled that better than most executives handle a boardroom," he said. Emily glanced at the empty room, the half-cleared tables, the wax cooling in the candle holders. "A dark room makes people nervous," she replied. "The trick is not letting them know you are nervous too." He smiled faintly, not charmed, but interested. "Are you looking for expansion capital?" She almost laughed. Not because she did not need it, but because men like Nathaniel usually offered money with invisible strings tied around it. "I am looking for partners who understand that this place is not a vanity project," she said. "It is an operating business." Nathaniel nodded once, as if that was the answer he had hoped for. In the months that followed, he became the first investor who did not speak to her, as though her vision required translation. He read her revenue forecasts line by line. He asked about margins, staffing, seasonal bookings, insurance, drainage, kitchen capacity, and the cost of maintaining historic glass in February. He never called her brave in the tone people use when they mean fragile. He never said Ryan's name, because Emily had not built a company out of being left. She had built one out of staying. His investment helped expand the West Terrace, build the private bridal suite, install the climate system that kept winter weddings warm without fogging the windows, and hire Martin Ellis full-time. But Nathaniel did not save the Ashford glass house. By the time he arrived, Emily had already dragged it from ruin into revenue, from memory into structure, from a dream into a calendar booked 11 months ahead. What he gave her was not rescue. It was recognition. And recognition, to a woman who had once been dismissed in rooms she helped pay for, felt quieter and more permanent than applause. The clause Ryan never read sat on page 14 of the venue agreement, beneath a section titled Operational Access and Investor Review. It was written in the clean, ordinary language of lawyers who knew that powerful consequences did not need dramatic wording. The owner and designated partners of the Ashford Glass House retained the right to enter and inspect any active event for quality assurance, investor relations, safety compliance, and brand representation. Ryan had signed below it 3 months earlier without pausing. He had been seated in his corner office in Manhattan, one eye on a market report, the other on Vanessa's text messages about floral colors, and he had treated the contract the way he treated most things he believed were beneath him. He skimmed the price, approved the deposit, checked the cancellation penalties, and sent it back with a signature that looked more confident than careful. Vanessa had wanted a place that would photograph well from every angle. Ryan had wanted a place expensive enough to make the wedding feel like a public announcement. Neither of them had asked who owned it. The name Ashford sounded old, private, untouched by people they knew. It sounded like something with a family crest. Not a woman in Beacon who still kept rubber boots in the trunk of her car. Now, as twilight settled over the Hudson Valley, the clause waited quietly inside Martin Ellis's file folder, no louder than a folded napkin, no sharper than a line of black ink. Emily understood it better than anyone. She had insisted on that language after the first year, not because she expected to face Ryan Whitmore beneath her own glass ceiling, but because she had learned that beauty without control could be taken apart by carelessness. A venue was not just flowers and music. It was exits that had to remain clear, heaters that had to work when the temperature dropped near 58 degrees, grandparents who needed chairs away from drafts, kitchen teams that needed timing, and brides who deserved not to feel the seams behind the elegance. She protected the room because the room carried her name, even when guests never saw it. In her office above the closed bakery, Emily closed the live security feed and opened the event schedule. 6:30, ceremony. 7:15, cocktail hour on the West Terrace. 8 o'clock, dinner service. 9:10, first toast. 9:30, investor recognition and venue partnership acknowledgement. A small addition requested by Nathaniel Brooks's office because 2 foundation donors attending the wedding were also being courted for a winter arts gala. Ryan had approved the revised timeline with a single-word email, fine. Emily looked at that word now and felt nothing rise in her chest. Not triumph, not dread, only the old lesson that careless people often open the doors they later wished had stayed locked. Her phone lit with a message from Nathaniel. I am 10 minutes from Beacon. Do you still want to attend the review? She read it twice, then looked toward the garment bag hanging from the back of the office door. Inside was a black crepe dress with long sleeves, simple enough not to ask for attention, precise enough to hold a room if attention arrived on its own. Beside it were low heels, a pearl comb, and the thin gold watch she had bought herself after the glass house booked its first full season. For a moment, Emily stood very still. She thought of Ryan's last sentence in their kitchen, the way he had said world as if it were a country where he owned the border. She thought of the greenhouse roof leaking into buckets, of 10-degree mornings, of the first bride who cried because the sunset came through the restored glass exactly when the music began. Then she took the dress from the hanger. She was not going to his wedding as a ghost from his past. She was not going to interrupt, accuse, or remind him of anything he had chosen to forget. She was going because the contract allowed it, the schedule required it, and the building was hers. Downstairs, Nathaniel's Blacktown car pulled to the curb with no flash, no horn, no performance. When Emily stepped outside, the evening air smelled faintly of rain and warm brick. Nathaniel opened the rear door himself, his expression calm, his suit dark, his presence steady beside her. He did not ask if she was sure. That was one of the reasons she trusted him. As the car turned toward Route 9, the sky deepened from gold to blue, and the Ashford glass house waited ahead, glowing in the distance like a lantern built from everything Ryan had failed to see. By 9:10, the wedding had become exactly what Ryan Whitmore wanted it to look like. The ceremony had ended beneath the glass ceiling while the last blue of evening settled over the Hudson, and Vanessa had walked back down the aisle on his arm as 200 guests rose in a wave of silk, dark suits, perfume, and applause. The cocktail hour had spilled onto the West Terrace, where heaters glowed softly against the cooling September air, and servers moved through the crowd with crab cakes, sparkling water, and champagne in narrow flutes. Every detail seemed to agree with him. The orchids were perfect. The river was silver. The photographs looked expensive before anyone had even edited them. Ryan accepted congratulations as if they were overdue payments. He let old colleagues admire the venue. Let Vanessa's friends praise the flowers. Let a college roommate slap his shoulder and say, "You did it, man. This is next level." Ryan smiled like a man who believed next level was not just a compliment, but a border he had crossed. Alone. During dinner, he sat at the center of the long head table beneath a chandelier that reflected across the glass walls in 1,000 small points of light. Vanessa leaned close whenever someone raised a camera, graceful, polished, careful to turn her ring toward the lens. Her parents looked relieved. His partners looked impressed. And the people who had known Emily, the ones who had once eaten grocery store pasta in the apartment she shared with Ryan before there were investors, before there were tailored suits and private tastings in Napa, kept their memories behind polite smiles. They knew better than to mention her name too loudly. Ryan had taught the room how he wanted the past handled, folded, minimized, placed out of sight. Then came the toast. He stood with a champagne flute in his hand, and the room softened around him. The band lowered into a gentle piano line. Candlelight warmed the white linen. Vanessa looked up at him as if he had already said something beautiful. Ryan thanked the families. He thanked the guests who had flown in from Chicago, Atlanta, Boston, and Los Angeles. He thanked everyone who had believed in second chances, in timing, in finding someone who truly matched your future. The words were smooth enough to pass as romance. Then his gaze moved across the room, resting for half a second on a table where 3 people from his old life sat very still. "Some people belong in your past," he said, smiling, "because they were never meant to stand beside the life you were building." A few guests laughed gently, unsure if they were supposed to. Vanessa touched his wrist, pleased by the line without understanding all the weight beneath it. Ryan continued, voice rich with confidence. "Tonight is proof that when you stop carrying what slows you down, you finally arrive where you were meant to be." The applause came, but it was thinner than before. At the back of the room, Martin Ellis stood near the service entrance with the event folder tucked against his side. Lily Morgan, holding the revised timeline, looked toward the lobby. Outside, beyond the glass doors, a black town car rolled silently beneath the portico. No one noticed at first. Ryan was still standing, still smiling, still tasting the last word of his own speech. The room returned to its music, to the clink of silverware, to the soft movement of servers clearing salad plates. But something in the rhythm had shifted. The lighting team adjusted the dimmers for the next scheduled segment. The large screen behind the band, previously showing engagement photographs of Ryan and Vanessa, faded to a calm ivory background. Ryan lowered into his chair, satisfied, while Vanessa whispered that the toast had been perfect. He believed her. He believed the evening belonged to him because every eye had turned when he lifted his glass. He did not see Martin step into the hall. He did not see Nathaniel Brooks enter first, dark suit immaculate, expression composed, followed by Emily Carter in a black dress that did not sparkle and did not need to. She paused just inside the lobby, beneath the gold emblem on the marble wall, and the staff around her straightened with the quiet respect reserved not for a guest, not for a memory, but for the person whose name held the building together. Inside the dining room, Ryan reached for Vanessa's hand, still smiling at the applause he thought he had earned. The next part of the program was beginning exactly on time. The ivory screen behind the band brightened slowly, not with fireworks or dramatic music, but with the quiet polish of a scheduled presentation that had been approved weeks before. A few guests turned in their chairs, expecting a slideshow, a charity announcement, or another piece of wedding theater designed to make the room feel important. Ryan barely looked up at first. He was leaning toward Vanessa, accepting her whispered praise, still warmed by his own toast. Then Martin Ellis stepped to the small podium near the edge of the dance floor, adjusted the microphone once, and smiled with the practiced calm of a man who had guided hundreds of rooms through delicate moments without ever spilling the truth too quickly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth beneath the glass ceiling. "Before we continue with the evening, the Ashford Glass House would like to acknowledge a special partnership connected to several upcoming foundation events here in the Hudson Valley." The room quieted. Forks lowered. Conversations paused. On the screen, the venue's gold emblem appeared first, elegant and familiar, the same mark printed on the invitations, the menus, and the small cards beside the champagne wall. Then the next line faded in beneath it, "Founded and owned by Emily Carter." The room did not gasp all at once. It changed by degrees, the way weather changes before rain. A woman near table 6 lifted her hand to her mouth. One of Ryan's former partners stopped with his glass halfway to his lips. Vanessa's smile held for one extra second, then loosened as she read the name again, searching the faces around her for an explanation no one wanted to provide. Ryan stared at the screen. For a moment, the words seemed to reject meaning. Emily Carter was a name from another room, another apartment, another life he had edited down until it no longer threatened him. It did not belong in gold letters above his wedding dinner. It did not belong behind his flowers, his guests, his new wife, his toast. But the screen did not change, and the room did not rescue him from it. Martin continued, steady and respectful. "Please welcome the founder and owner of the Ashford Glass House, Ms. Emily Carter, joined this evening by Mr. Nathaniel Brooks, managing partner of Brooks Meridian Capital and strategic investor in the venue's regional expansion." The side doors opened. Emily entered without hurry. She did not look like a woman returning to prove she had survived. She looked like someone arriving to check on a room she already knew by heart. Her black dress moved cleanly around her knees. Her hair was swept back with a pearl comb that caught the chandelier light only when she turned. Nathaniel walked beside her, not in front of her, not guiding her as if she needed direction, but matching her pace with a quiet formality that made his respect visible. The staff near the wall straightened as she passed. Lily lowered her eyes with a small smile. Martin stepped aside from the podium as Emily reached the edge of the dance floor. Ryan stood before he realized he had moved. His chair scraped softly against the stone, a small sound that seemed too loud in the hush. Vanessa turned toward him, her face pale beneath careful makeup. "Ryan," she whispered, but he did not answer. He was looking at Emily, then at Nathaniel, then at the screen, where her name remained bright and impossible. He remembered, unwillingly, the old greenhouse photograph someone had once described to him, the one he had dismissed with a laugh. He remembered saying she was never built for his world. He remembered the way she had looked at him that last morning, not broken, just still. Now she stood beneath the restored glass, and the room curved around her as naturally as light around a flame. Nathaniel inclined his head toward the guests, then spoke only once, his voice measured. Emily's leadership turned this property into one of the most respected private event venues in the region. Brooks Meridian is proud to support what she built. He did not embellish. He did not need to. The sentence landed with more force because it contained no cruelty. Ryan's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Every insult he had hidden inside jokes, every polished version of the divorce, every claim that Emily had been too small for the life he wanted, now stood exposed without a single accusation from her. Emily accepted the microphone from Martin and looked across the room, not at Ryan first, but at the staff, the tables, the candles, the guests seated away from the draft near the north glass exactly as she had instructed. "Thank you for trusting the Ashford Glass House with such an important evening," she said. Her voice was calm, warm, professional. Only then did her eyes meet Ryan's. She held his gaze for one breath, no longer. There was no anger in her face, no plea, no performance, just the quiet distance of a woman who had already walked through the fire and come back owning the light. The room waited for Emily Carter to do what everyone expected a wronged woman to do. They waited for her voice to sharpen, for her eyes to turn toward Ryan and make the private history public, for one sentence that would turn the wedding into a scene people would retell for years with lowered voices and lifted eyebrows. But Emily had not come to wound a room full of guests who had simply dressed up for a celebration. She had not come to punish Vanessa in front of her family, or to turn staff members into witnesses of a life she had already survived. She stood beside the podium with the microphone in her hand, looked across the candlelit tables, and gave them only grace. "Our team is honored to host you tonight," she said. "Please enjoy the rest of the evening." That was all. No accusation. No explanation. No history offered for public appetite. The band, professional enough to understand rescue when it was needed, moved into a soft jazz standard. Martin stepped forward with the event folder, and Emily signed the operational review form on the small table near the dance floor, her signature landing clean and steady beneath the line that confirmed the event had met house standards. Ryan watched the pen move. Years ago, he had watched that same hand edit his investor deck, rewrite his apology emails, sign documents he had been too distracted to read. Back then, he had mistaken her steadiness for something ordinary. Now, surrounded by white roses and 200 silent witnesses, he saw what steadiness looked like when it no longer belonged to him. Vanessa sat very still, her bouquet resting beside her plate, her face turned toward the screen where Emily's name had finally faded back into the gold emblem of the Ashford Glass House. She was not humiliated by Emily's words. Emily had not given her any. That somehow made the silence heavier. The wedding continued because Emily allowed it to continue. Servers returned with dinner plates. Glasses were refilled. The lights warmed again. But the shape of the evening had changed. Before, Ryan had stood at the center of a story he controlled. Now every guest understood there had been another story beneath it, built-in permits, payroll, restored glass, winter bookings, and a woman's refusal to disappear. Ryan stepped away from the head table as Emily handed the signed folder back to Martin. "Emily," he said, and the sound of her name in his mouth seemed to surprise even him. She turned. Not quickly, not emotionally, just enough to acknowledge that someone had spoken. For a moment, the years between them gathered in the space near the reflecting pool, the rented apartment, the bracelet she sold, the kitchen where he had told her she was not built for his world, the abandoned greenhouse he had laughed at, the toast he had just given without knowing she was already inside every wall around him. Ryan looked as though he wanted to explain, or apologize, or accuse the room of misunderstanding him. But apology, to matter, needed to arrive before the audience. Emily did not help him find the words. She looked at him with the calm distance of someone standing on the far shore of a storm that had ended long ago. "Congratulations, Ryan," she said. Her voice was gentle enough that no one could call it cruel. Then her eyes lifted briefly to the glass ceiling, to the lights reflected there, to the building that had carried her through every season of becoming. "It is a beautiful venue, is it not?" The sentence was simple. That was why it stayed. Ryan did not answer. Vanessa lowered her gaze. Nathaniel waited near the side doors, his posture quiet, his respect leaving room for Emily to finish the moment herself. She did not look back at the screen, the head table, or the man who once believed leaving her would make him larger. She walked out beside Nathaniel through the lobby where the gold emblem glowed above the marble desk. Lily opened the glass door before anyone asked. Outside, the September night had cooled, and the west terrace heaters shimmered against the dark. Emily paused beneath the portico and looked once toward the river, silver under the moon, moving without permission from anyone. Behind her, music resumed inside the glass house, softer now, careful now, no longer the anthem of Ryan's victory. He had come there to prove she had lost everything. By the end of the night, he was standing inside everything she had become. She did not win him back. She won herself.